You're watching PowerNation. Today on Detroit Muscle, we steer our Caprice closer to the finish and give you our recipe for some interior upgrades with a dash of carpet. Hey guys, welcome to Detroit Muscle. We got our 71 Caprice Fat Stack back in the shop looking like $1 million. Now while you were gone, we got a little more work done by installing the hood, deck lid, and a few chrome trinkets. But now it's time to address the soul of this beast, which would be the interior. Most of the time when people think of that subject matter, seats come to mind. Now we're nowhere near ready to drop these things in yet. We have some upgrades to do and some beautification work. Now when it comes to the interior on Fat Stack, we pretty much have a blank canvas because the only upholstery that's really in there is the headliner and the dashboard. Now if you'll remember back, we made an upgrade on this car and converted it over to a 6-speed manual. So we're gonna have to do an upgrade on our steering column because that factory one, well, it isn't gonna cut it. We've got a couple of issues with trying to reuse this old column. And what that would be is this big chrome shifter hanging off to the side. With us now having that shifter in the middle, well, we don't need this one, obviously. Some people would knock the pin out and pull that shifter out, but we don't want to do that because then that ugly little stub is still on there. We want to build something a bit nicer than that. So we're going to have to go down the path of using something aftermarket. We went to Summit Racing and found this unit. It's made by ididit and it's designed to fit a 69 to 72 Chevelle. It's drastically similar. From here to here, it's identical. However, from here to here, it's about 2 inches shorter. Now, if you're looking to do a conversion like this, there's a lot that goes on with it. You need to keep in mind the mount, upper and lower, these both have to be solid points. You don't want anything moving around and flexing. Next would be your electronics. Now, this kit comes with some items that helps to make that transition a whole lot smoother. We're going to transfer our old brackets off the column onto this new one. Another unique feature on these steering column brackets is these little things are designed to be a shear point, meaning if the car is involved in an accident and the column starts to come back through, these things pull out of this bracket and allow the column to move around instead of kind of pushing back up on you. According to my research, this will either do one of two things, work or not. Yep, like a glove. Now we got this piece off and we managed to not tear it, which is cool, but it doesn't look the best. But what's cool about a piece of rubber is you can recondition this if you've got a sandblaster. Let me show you what I'm talking about. What we use in our media blaster is crushed glass. Now the technique to this is relatively simple. You just dial your pressure back to get started. You don't want to get all up close and personal with the nozzle to the piece that you're blasting. If you'll pull back from it a bit, you can kind of fan it across it. That will slowly remove all that funkiness off that piece of rubber. Now if the pressure's too low, with it starting low, you can always dial it up without damaging the component. Just get a feel for this, and then you should be able to come back with a pretty nice piece when you're all said and done. Well, check that out. It made a dramatic improvement. Now I just need to blast and paint my other bracket so I can bolt this thing in, and then we can give that column kind of a test spin. The next thing that we need to do is connect our steering column to the gearbox. Now originally, this was the thing that came out of our car, and it won't work with our new column being 2 inches shorter. So we're going to have to go a little bit different route. Now with this thing, we want to have a similar design for a couple of reasons. The design of this shaft is collapsible. How that is a benefit, if the vehicle is ever involved in an accident, this thing will shorten up. If it was a solid piece like this, it can't be compressed. And that will drive everything in that steering column back towards you, which is dangerous. The other thing that we're wanting to do is make sure that we install a rag joint. This helps to dampen the vibrations that comes through the suspension that can be transferred from the gearbox, through the shaft, through the steering wheel, and back to your hands. Now the first thing we're going to do is assemble our little joint here onto the shaft, and this is the one that would connect to the steering column. Now you want to always pay attention to how much of this is slid through your joint here.
I like to have it basically flush with the top. That isn't mandatory, but you want it really close. And once we get everything set the way we will, we'll have to take this apart and put dimples under there. Now this takes a little bit of some finagling, kind of wiggling parts around. You just want to make sure that you keep in mind that you have enough spline or shaft slid up into each one of those joints. You don't ever want to have it too close where it could possibly come out, because this is how you're going to steer the car around. Now once I get all these kind of dialed in, I want to make a mark around each shaft in the joint. Once you get it marked, you just want to take everything all the way back apart. Now to make our notches, I just used a round file and made a notch right here on the top of the tube, and I did that also back here in the back. Now on another side of that, I had to drill a hole in there so that this stud can go all the way through this tube. I'm gonna slap this thing in and see what it looks like. Man, that dude's gonna have all kind of jack. Now that we got our steering column in, we can get onto that dash. Coming up, we do a bit of light reading. Now the next thing that we're wanting to tackle on old Fat Stack is addressing the dash. Luckily for us, our gauge cluster and all is in pretty good shape. Now one unique feature with the 71s as opposed to the cars later in life, these cars have a black dash in them. Cars that came a little later, they have usually a color match piece, meaning if the dash is green, well, that piece over there is probably green as well. If you have one of these that doesn't have any flaws in it, well, I have to say you've got one rare and hard to find piece. Now the next step that you can do is a very economical repair, and that's the route that we're going to take. If you're looking to paint or coat any of your interior components, I can't stress to you enough to clean everything, because normal coatings that you apply to kind of bring back the shine and stuff on interior pieces, well, paint and them don't play well together. I'd also clean them both with a solvent and say a water-based material. That gets rid of both of them. It helps to ensure that the paint or the coating you're going to be applying goes on a whole lot easier. A lot of paint guys use glass cleaner of some sort on their paint prep. Don't be afraid to use quite a bit either. Like if this stuff's running off, it may even help to run that contaminants out of those joints. Dang. Also, don't be afraid to use a lot of towels, because if the towel's dirty, all you're really doing is just moving all that junk around. If the rag is clean, usually the surface is clean. What's that? Ah. You definitely ain't throwing that in the trash. We don't leave that in the car. Sitting here looking at all this green paint, I kind of feel guilty covering it up. That is a lie, 100%. Yeah. That's what you're looking for. No dirt, contaminants on top of your rag. Our solution to that ugly dash is this Coverlay piece that we got from Rock Auto. What's great about these is they make a dramatic improvement without a whole lot of effort. This is a hard plastic cover that simply lays right over top of your original component. They make these in several different colors, and we chose black, but we're still going to dye this thing because we want the sheens to match. Now to install this, it comes with some silicone glue. You just put around all the perimeters and the openings, and then you lay it into place. Now I want to do a test run of this one on there because I want to make sure that existing green dash is all covered up. So we may have to paint around some of the edges. That's why I went ahead and prepped those earlier. Fits pretty nice, but it does leave a couple of edges here that you can see that are still green. So we'll have to paint all the way around there. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to take this out, do some masking, and do some painting. Whenever you cut this, you don't want to apply a lot of pressure because you don't want to mar the aluminum or scar it really. All you're trying to do is just cut through the tape. just like with any other painting process, you're really not trying to cover everything in one coat. Put a few light coats on there. Usually turns out way better. Well, I wound up changing my mind a bit, guys. I went ahead and sprayed this thing, but I went and sprayed it flat black instead of gloss black. I decided that the top surface needed to be a little bit different. I'm gonna put this over here, apply my glue, and then we can stick it. Now, with the amount of money and labor that we put forth on this thing, man, we have definitely got a great return on our investment. Using these books to do this install isn't mandatory, but I put a few of these on these big body Chevys, and it sure does help to make everything kind of lay out nice and even.
Up next, we flash back and look at an oldsie, but a goodsie. In my opinion, one of the best features of almost any year of Caprice or Impala is the elevated interior. And that's kind of just what these cars were built for, comfort and luxury. And going fast was a little bit of an afterthought. However, GM's other platforms, including Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac, wanted to try and walk that line of performance and style. So Buick came out with the Grand Sports, Pontiac had the GTO, and Oldsmobile, well, they had the 442.
There's a lot of people that see the car at a show or see it on the street and think it's just a plain vanilla 442. They don't really know what lurks underneath the hood.
That's cause this 66 442 is equipped with the ultra rare Ram Air package known as a W30. Only 54 got the factory race setup that year. This is number 10.
Your only clues from the outside are the scoops inside the front bumper. Looking like some crazy two-headed shop vac, the scoops fed air through tubes directly into the air cleaner. The battery even had to be moved to the trunk because the tubes got in the way.
As if that wasn't wild enough, it's also outfitted with a one-year-only tri-carb system called the L69. Utilizing a progressive mechanical linkage, it eliminates the lag time of the outer two carbs opening, which was common with vacuum-assisted setups found on the GTOs.
The powerhouse of the W30 was a specifically tuned 400 cubic inch V8 with a hotter cam and high tension valve springs. In order to keep the exhaust heat out of the car, there was a heat riser shutoff valve on the intake.
The engine was blueprinted on the bottom end with looser tolerances designed for drag racing. Rated at 360 horsepower, it likely generated north of 400.
Box-lowered control arms, front and rear stabilizer bars, and stiffer springs gave the 442s a reputation as one of the best handling muscle cars ever.
The rest of the car is bare bones, built on the low-level F85 body style. It's got dog dish hubcaps and a bench seat. To save weight, there's no heater or radio.
The only option available was the Rocket Rally Pack gauges, which they made round instead of horizontal. The mandatory Hurst 4-speed pulled a set of 411 gears, and it all rolled on skinny 7.5 by 14 redline tires.
The 66 models look pretty much like the 65s, except they got a hump in the rear quarters and fender vents behind the front tires. 442s had a unique mesh grille and taillight treatment.
Introduced in '64 to compete with the GTO, the numbers originally meant 4-barrel, 4 on the floor, and 2 exhaust pipes. That kept changing as they added automatics and multi-carb setups. With that tri-carb, it should have been called the 642.
The W30 option wasn't advertised in '66. It wasn't even in the Olds brochure, so most folks still don't know it was offered that year. It was mainly targeted at racers as part of a win on Sunday, sell on Monday strategy.
Well, it worked. The Brainbow Olds took the C-Stock title in '66, and Olds sold almost 22,000 442s that year.
It doesn't matter how rare this car is, it was made to run hard, making 12-second quarters in stock condition. With performance like that, you'll wish this was your daddy's Oldsmobile. Coming up, we add some creature comforts to our Caprice. Hey guys, well, we're continuing on old Fat Stack, working on the upholstery work, and I'm actually referring to the carpet. We've showed you guys several times how to tailor fit one of these carpet kits. With our 69 Charger that we built, we had to get a bit creative and call in a hired gun. After making a few templates, we transferred those to some flat stock carpet, cut those out, a little bit of sewing. Next thing you know, we have a showpiece. The end product looked custom and clean. We're gonna be reusing some of those techniques inside of this car and a few more. Now, if you remember back, we wound up installing a 6-speed into old Fat Stack, and it requires some transmission tunnel modifications. With our floor being so close to stock, we believe that one of these stock factory replacement carpet kits will do us just fine. Now with them, you do have options and they have their benefits. With working or ordering carpet, you'll hear a term like mass backing, and what that refers to is this dark gray material on the back side of the carpet. It works really well to reduce temperature and vibrations inside of the car. However, if you're trying to do something custom like we are, it's a bit more complicated to work with. What we're going to be using is the basic stuff. It doesn't have any kind of backing on here, which will allow us to conform it to our application. Now you'll hear terms like stretching, and when you're working with house carpet, you're just meaning to stretch it as tight from one end to the other. And with ours, we're going to stretch it kind of around that big tunnel in there. When installing carpet, I like to look for what I refer to as corners, and that would be like the corner of the floorboard or the toe board, something like that. That is your location point. When you put the carpet in right in top of there, that tells you that the rest of it should kind of follow as it lays on. I know this thing has that whitish backing on it. We're gonna have to cut the section out right through here so that it'll lay down and it'll expose that backing. Now, whenever you go to cut this stuff, you can use a knife or a nice pair of scissors. I actually prefer the scissors. While you're trimming here, make sure you're only cutting through this part, not the carpet itself. Now we're cutting this out as one big piece. That way we can come back and re-add it later instead of just tearing it out in chunks. I would say this is similar to shearing a sheep, but I have no idea what it's like to shear a sheep. Now let's put this thing back in there, see what we got. Well, it's laying in pretty good. Now we got our hole cut for it so everything could fall into place, but what we did notice is it's a little bit higher here like we were anticipating, but in all reality, we could live with this. We're running a bench seat and all of that would be under it. But what we can't live with is this big old protruding section up here. What happened is since this is higher, it kind of tilted this down and it all bunched up. We're gonna take a heat gun, basically melt the backing on there and then lay it back into place and then squish it down. That'll tighten up all this weave and flatten that thing out. Right now we're heating a broad area of this thing, so keep your heat gun moving around on you. Now this thing can literally melt a hole in that carpet. You can usually tell when it's starting to get right because one, it gets kind of shiny, and two, it gets a whole lot more limber. I just realized something right before I was about to screw up. I need to get some gloves on. Made that mistake once before. Now with my protective gloves on, we'll get it done. Now, it's not all gonna be fixed all at once. It's gonna take a few times to get all that dialed in. What you're doing, you're holding it in place while it's kind of squished up, and as it cools off, it'll hold itself there. And we'll repeat this process probably 5-6 times to get it exactly where we want it. Well, that's way better than it was. Now, if you wanted to continue these little odd bumps here and there, well, you can use this same process. If you're wanting to stretch it to conform kind of around something, exactly the same. Well, I promise you guys, we're gonna be out terrorizing the neighborhood and fat stack before you even know it. We keep checking things off the list. You know, the steering column's in it. Gotta have a way to turn the wheel. The dash, it looks a whole lot better. And the carpet is well on its way.
And for us, this is one of our favorite parts of the build. When that finish line's in sight and you can finally see that all your hard work's starting to pay off. And you know what? All we like's finishing up, as Tommy likes to say.
With that, you know, getting some help would be kind of nice. Where you been?
Man, if I told you, there'd be an APB out on my name. Grab that sack. You wanna go in first or me?